The Quds Force is the irregular warfare unit of Iran's Corps of Guardians of the Islamic Revolution, created during the Holy Defense to augment the capabilities of the Sepah to include irregular warfare. It has since become one of the chief means of expanding Iranian soft power within the Middle East and throughout the world. Carrying the Persian name for Jerusalem, it is emblematic of the eschatological significance of the Islamic Republic's regional military strategy. More has come to light about this secretive organization since its inception, but precious little of its organization, personnel, weaponry, and operations is known, and comes to light only in the wake of its suspected activities. The close of the Holy Defense in 1988 saw the completion of the first chapter of the history of the Islamic Republic, conventional war. The peace which followed left the new government intact, but the population war-weary. The government needed to turn its attention to rebuilding the infrastructure and bringing orderliness to the disrupted lives of its people. The armed forces, both the Artesh and the Sepah, though rich with battle experience, had been worn down and desperately needed this peace. If this war taught the Iranian leadership anything, the lesson was prevent another conventional attack by pushing the frontier for possible conflict as far as possible from the border. To safeguard the home of the revolution, which Khomeini and his followers viewed and still view as the only legitimate Islamic government, and the one which is meant to prepare the way for the return of the Mahdi, a sizable buffer had to be constructed to allow for its endurance. While Iran had not been defeated in the Holy Defense, it had been severely wounded by Saddam's army with Western backing. At the end of the war, Iran had a shortage in key resources and finance. The war clearly exposed the weaknesses of both the Iranian economy and the armed forces. The Mujtahid rulers needed to create and perfect a national defense based upon self-reliance in order to turn Iran into a fortress for Islam, from which calls for Islamic unity in the face of Zionist and Western imperialist influence could issue. Having survived this baptism of fire intact, and with geopolitics still centered around the bipolar contest between the United States and the Soviet Union, the time for such reconstruction appeared optimal. The Sepah was created immediately after the revolution in order to counter threats from armed opposition groups inside Iran, such as the MKO, the Mujahideen-e-Khalq or People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran, and to protect the ideological integrity of the new political system. Originally a paramilitary formation, during the Holy Defense, it necessarily took on a military character while shouldering with the Artesh in the burden of fighting. During the war, in addition to the many conventional battles fought against the Iraqis, the Iranians also deployed special forces to the front line in the mountainous terrain of the north, and behind the lines to support the Kurdish struggle in northern Iraq against Saddam Hussein's regime. To mirror this unit within the Artesh, the Sepah created the Quds Force to engage in all aspects of irregular warfare. Thus, the role of the Quds Force in the establishment of Hezbollah's Islamic resistance, al-Muqawama al-Islamiyya, in 1982 during the Lebanese Civil War was inevitable. Following this, it was used to support the operations of the Hezb-e-Wadat Shia Mujahideen in Afghanistan during the Soviet occupation. By supporting Hezbollah and the Hezb-e-Wadat, Iran was able to counter, respectively, the American Zionist coalition and the Soviets, thereby keeping these two groups from threatening the territorial integrity of the Islamic Republic. When Khomeini died in 1989 and was succeeded by Ali Khamenei, who oversaw the transition from a war to a peace economy, Quds was able, along with its parent Sepah, to maintain its level of funding and even to increase its relative importance within the military strategy of Iran. Having discussed the ideological and strategic origins and purposes of the Quds Force, let us look at its structure and methods of warfare. Apart from its three senior commanders, no names can be attributed to either its leadership or the remainder of the force. Major General Pastar Qasem Soleimani, presently the most well-known Iranian soldier, has commanded the Quds Force since 1997, and his two deputies are Brigadier General Pastar Ismail Khani and Brigadier General Pastar Ahmad Saburi. Because all members of Quds are taken from the larger Sepah, one can presume that it retains the same rank structure as its parent, although it is impossible to verify or deny this. Similarly, although the size of the Quds force can be approximated, its small-level tactical organization can only be guessed at based upon the arrangement of other comparable military units. As indicated previously, Quds has two missions: advising and training of foreign military and police, and clandestine operations. Teams of men for either type of mission may be formed ad hoc out of the service pools of each of the 8 directorates suspected to exist. According to the United States Joint Chiefs of Staff, Quds is divided into the following 8 directorates: Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Oman, Yemen, Persian Gulf, Israel, Lebanon, Jordan, Middle East, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Turkey, Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Moldova, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, former Soviet Union, Central and Western Europe, and the United States and Canada. Further, U.S. military intelligence suggests that Quds is divided into several branches of specialization: intelligence, finance, politics, sabotage, special operations. Because, however, its operations are unconventional, there is no reason to think that the Quds Force has an organization remarkably different from other secret services. For its clandestine operations, something approaching a commando team of varying size, anywhere from 5 to 15 men led by 1 or 2 officers, seems reasonable. Also, there could be organic permanent units of Quds assigned to each directorate, each with a different operational specialty, and these would invariably be combined arms units, but with the component men varying depending upon what needs to be accomplished. For the advisory and training missions, arguably what constitutes the greatest percentage of Quds assignments, one can imagine an officer NCO structure corresponding to the level of the ranks needing training. For example, so many officers of such a rank to train their peers or lower-ranking officers, and likewise so many NCOs to train their peers or enlisted men. As a side note, it has been suggested that Quds trains most of its clients in either the Sudan or in Iran itself. For all of these missions, the officer-NCO ratio is necessarily higher than in the rest of the Sepah. For this reason, it can be argued that officers and NCOs comprise a large majority of the Quds Force personnel, seeing that enlisted men would not be used to train or advise their superiors. Where does the Quds Force carry out its clandestine operations? From reasonable conjecture regarding the structure, the reach of Quds is worldwide. It has been suspected of involvement in South America, for example in supporting the government of Venezuela, of continuing to intervene in Afghanistan against the American presence, of constituting a permanent training and advisory role to the Islamic resistance of Hezbollah, of supporting the Syrian government since the conflict of 2011, and most of all of involvement in Iraq since 2003. Since 2008, the Quds Force has been given control of all military operations in Iraq, and it formed and currently oversees the 3 primary Shiite paramilitary organizations which work in conjunction with the Iraqi military: Asa'ib al-Haq, League of the Righteous, with 10,000 members; Kata'ib Hizb Allah, Brigades of the Party of God, with 30,000 plus members; and the Saraya al-Salam, peace companies, with anywhere from 10,000 to 50,000 members. This theatre of operations, provided indirectly to Quds by the Americans, gives the most continual experience to its members through the training and directing of these militias. In the recent theatre of the Persian Gulf, the recent attacks against oil tankers bear the mark of what Quds is capable of, but the Iranian government has consistently denied responsibility. Conversely, American and Israeli special forces possess the capability to carry out such false flag attacks, and their histories give plenty of examples. Currently, the most important missions which Quds directly or in which it participates are missile shipments to Hezbollah, arming and directing of Shiite militias in Iraq, support of Syrian government, support of Houthis. As to types of weapons, the Quds Force probably uses the same species as other special forces. For example, the United States Green Berets, Russian Spetsnaz, British SAS, that is, handguns, for example the PC-9ZOAF, submachine guns, for example MPT-9, KL-7.62, heavy machine guns, e.g. MGA-3, portable manpads, e.g. Sohail, rocket-propelled grenade launcher, for example RAD or PG-29, anti-tank weapons, for example the Sege 1 or 2, portable mortars, for example the 37mm Marsh mortar, plastic explosives, for example C4, Semtex. The use of heavy equipment does not correspond to its missions. In terms of size, the active personnel of Quds has been estimated to be anywhere from 5,000 to 20,000, although the most common number given is 15,000. GlobalSecurity.org asserts that in 2008, the Iranian Supreme National Security Council authorized an increase in the size of the group to 15,000, but this cannot be presently confirmed. By comparison, the Russian Spetsnaz has a strength of roughly 5,000, the United States Green Berets 7,000, the British SAS 400 to 600. Moving to consider its place in the Iranian political ideology of 12 Shi'ism, Quds Force bears great eschatological significance. A fact which receives barely any coverage in the Western press, the founding of the Islamic Republic was clearly stated by Ayatollah Khomeini to coincide with the approach of the end of the world. As Twelver Shias, Khomeini and his successors are convinced that the maintenance of Velayat-e-Faqih is critical to the return of the 12th Imam, Muhammad al-Mahdi. The eschatology of the Jafari school of jurisprudence, the official legal teaching in Iran, named after the 6th Imam Jafar al-Sadiq, names Jerusalem as central to the return of the Mahdi and to the establishment of Islamic government throughout the world, i.e. the golden age of Islamic rule as promised by the Prophet Muhammad. According to Sunni and Shia prophecies, the army foreordained to conquer Jerusalem is to be comprised of mostly people from the region of Iran, with Iranians having a great and important role in the event. Thus, the naming of the Special Operations subset of the Sepah after the Persian name for the holy city of Jerusalem should show the rest of the world just how important to the Iranians is the maintenance of their system of government by all means possible. Currently, the use of Quds to engage in asymmetrical warfare against the American-Israeli alliance is the best means to ensure this end. Presently, Quds can be seen as forming a shield forward for the Islamic Republic from a strategic point of view. This gives eschatological importance to their continued support of Hezbollah in Lebanon and to their great commitment in men and material to ensure the continuance of the Syrian government. They believe that when the Imam Mahdi returns, Zionism, which Shia regard as one of the main tools in the struggle between good and evil, will be defeated in the final great battle for Jerusalem. Therefore, they are approaching as close as possible to Israel, serving at the front line. They have succeeded in giving Iran a reasonable amount of protection, if at the expense of their allies who are physically closer to Israel. The American Navy remains a threat to the Persian Gulf, but with the wider Sepah, to whose vigilance this theatre is committed, are confident they can close the Strait of Hormuz if necessary. The strategic balance is currently in favor of Iran, and they have thus fulfilled what they believe to be their role in preparing for the Mahdi's return. For those who believe in the eschatological purpose of the Islamic Republic, the Quds Force is unquestionably the vanguard of the coming march on Jerusalem, and the Western press ignores this to their own peril and the continued ignorance of their audiences. From military and political standpoints, Quds has been very effective. Iranian strategy has, since the 1979 revolution, been to keep the American-Israeli alliance and its proxies at bay. As stated previously, due to Iran's inability to wage a full-scale war against both countries, the use of unconventional warfare has made the Quds Force come into prominence with Iran's national defensive strategy. Through both its advisory and training roles and its clandestine operations, Quds is used to prevent Iran's two chief enemies from realizing strategic objectives in the Middle East and Persian Gulf, and to make their continued presence within Iran's immediate zone of security as costly and unpleasant as possible.